to go on mute at 3. 1, 2, and 3.
This is Frank Islam, Chairman and CEO of our investment group and your host of Washington Calling, where we interview leading voices from business, from politics, from security that impact you, the viewer. Today, we are fortunate to have a distinguished guest. His name is Tilak Devasher. He's the author of 3 widely acclaimed books on Pakistan. He retired as Government of India's Special Secretary and is a leading expert in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the region. He served as a member of the India's National Security Advisory Board. Welcome to our show. Thank you for coming to our show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to the discussion.
Welcome. You're most welcome. We're fortunate to have you. Tell us who you are personally and professionally. As you understand, you're also known as an Indian expert in Pakistan. Please tell us your interest, your expertise on Pakistan. And I know you're also well known in terms of security issues that impact the India and Pakistan and the South Asia region as well. So tell us a little bit about you.
You know, my interest in Pakistan surprisingly began very early in life, thanks to the stories that my father, an Indian Air Force officer, used to tell us about 2 Pakistan Air Force officers who had been his flight commanders during the Second World War in the Royal Indian Air Force, flying Spitfires and Hurricanes over Burma. And these 2 gentlemen later on went to head the Pakistan Air Force, Air Marshal Asghar Khan and Air Marshal Noor Khan. So that's how I became interested in something called Pakistan. I was very young at that time. The Indo-Pak Wars of 1965 and 1971 further heightened my interest in Pakistan. In college and in university, I studied the partition of India and the freedom struggle, and I was kind of hooked. During my professional life, I had an opportunity to look at Pakistan far more closely. And after I superannuated from government service, I've read even more on Pakistan than I did while I was in service. And one thing that struck me was that most of the attention in India gets focused on issues of terrorism emanating from Pakistan,
Right.
On ceasefire violations, on infiltration, on the stop-go Indo-Pak relations, the nuclear issue. But as a result, the real and serious problems of and in Pakistan tend to get ignored in India. Very few people in India know what are the issues that confront Pakistan on a day-to-day basis. So I decided that I will try and study Pakistan beyond the beaten track, beyond the headlines, and try and answer some fundamental questions about Pakistan, like why is Pakistan such a troubled and troublesome state? Why does it languish at the bottom of almost every international comparison? Are its problems of recent origin, or are they rooted in its very genesis? So the search for answers to questions like these led me to develop a greater interest and understanding of Pakistan. And that's why I've written these 3 books on Pakistan, and I hope I'll write some more also.
Tell me a little bit about your 3 books that you wrote. What made you to write these books? What are the themes and messages of these books? Are these books available on Amazon that we can get it?
Yes. In fact, all 3 books are available on Amazon. They are far more expensive in the US than they are in India, but they are available on Amazon. My first book is called Pakistan Coating the Abyss, where I look at the internal workings and the internal problems of Pakistan. You know, issues like which are not greatly explored by people like water, education, population, economy. I looked at issues of madrasas, I looked at the issue of Islamization. I went into the history of the Pakistan movement itself. So that is the first book, Coating the Abyss. In fact, I was very pleased when a noted Pakistani commentator called it easily the best book on Pakistan.
Wow.
My second book is called Pakistan at the Helm. This looks at the leadership in Pakistan from Jinnah to Nawaz Sharif and General Musharraf. There again, it was very favorably reviewed in the Dawn, and one of the person who reviewed it said, this is a book which every Pakistani political leader must keep by their bedside because it is a summary of all that has gone before. And my last book, which is on Balochistan, again, has been very favorably reviewed in the Dawn, and somebody has again said it's far better than our own writings by our own academics or writers. And I think the reason for this, and which I really appreciate, is that people in Pakistan also realize that I am not just thumping. I am not trying to do Pakistan now. Because each of my books is so well referenced, I am trying to show a mirror to the people of Pakistan of where they're headed and what they need to they need to wake up and rectify it, and also to educate people in India that, look, what is the problem in Pakistan? Unfortunately in India, we have 1.3 billion experts on Pakistan, but very few who actually know what is happening in Pakistan. So my effort also has been to educate Indians that, try and understand the country, where that country is coming from, and therefore maybe then we can go ahead and find some sort of solutions. So it is meant for both as a mirror to Pakistan, as also to try and educate Indians about what Pakistan is.
Let's talk a little bit about the India-Pakistan relationship. It's very complex. How come they cannot get along? And they have shared history, shared heritage, shared background, and shared belief. So what do you see a brighter horizon in terms of the relationship between India and Pakistan as we move forward? And can we take this relationship to the next height? And why is it so complex and hostile?
I unfortunately am not optimistic at the moment that
You're not?
we can. No, I'm not. That we can improve relationship in the immediate or even in the medium term. And the reason for that is, there's a historical baggage. For the last 70 years, some of our finest brains, you had Pandit Nehru, you have Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, you have so many people who have tried their hands at improving Indo-Pak relations. Our finest diplomats from both sides have tried to engage each other and tried to solve the issue. It has not been resolved. So given this history, given this baggage, I am not so optimistic at the moment that it can be resolved at this, particularly in the immediate or in the medium term. And if you allow me, I just have to add, there is one new element in the whole relationship, which is unfortunate, and I'm sure whatever the reasons are, that unfortunately Prime Minister Imran Khan has injected an element of personalized attacks on Prime Minister Modi. If you look at his comments from last year, he has gone out on a limb to personally target the Prime Minister. And if you permit me, I'll just read out a few of the things that he's been talking about, which is, accusing him of ethnic cleansing of Muslims, the Hindu supremacist Modi government, comparing him to Hitler, the Hindutva exclusivist creed, and so on. Now, such derogatory references, personalized attacks on the Prime Minister, where it may win him some claps and kudos from the Pakistan army, has been a disaster for bilateral relations. There is no Indian leader who similarly has attacked Prime Minister Imran Khan. I mean, there is so much of material on Prime Minister Imran Khan in Reham Khan's book, but not a single leader, certainly not the Prime Minister, or even anybody else, has talked about Imran Khan's, attacked him personally. So this is one new element in the situation. And I think that Prime Minister Imran Khan, if he finds in the future that he has to initiate bilateral discussions or negotiations with India, he will find it very difficult that nobody in India is going to take him seriously, because he has gone out on a limb to target the person who has been elected with a thumping majority in India. Mr. Modi has come with almost over 300 seats. So it'll be very, very difficult for Imran Khan to backtrack. And I'm really sorry, and that, the Prime Minister of a country should have resorted to this kind of personalized attacks to another elected person of the other neighboring country. So therefore, I'm not very optimistic at the moment. Yeah.
Hopefully, the personal attack is obviously not good for both countries. That is just not fair, because he's elected Prime Minister in India, Mr. Modi, and Imran Khan is elected also in Pakistan. Let's shift a little bit, talk about the Afghan peace process. Both India and Pakistan have so much at stake. Do you think Taliban will honor the agreement? Do you believe that the Taliban is serious about this agreement? And what role India and Pakistan, and especially India, can play if the United States decides to withdraw the troops from Afghanistan?
See, one thing that we should be clear is that the United States did not need or does not need an agreement with the Taliban to leave Afghanistan. They can pull their troops out tomorrow. They didn't come in with any agreement, so they can leave at any time. They have sought to have this agreement with the Taliban so that the exit is peaceful, and they leave in place a structure where there is an intra-Afghan dialogue, and the Afghans themselves resort to some sort of a mutual agreement, which Afghanistan doesn't degenerate again into kind of a no man's land or what it was in the 90s. This is what the US intention is. Now, the agreement that they have done talks about counterterrorism. The Taliban will stop their links with the Al Qaeda and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, this has not happened. There was a report published by the UN Sanctions Monitoring Committee in May 2020, which clearly points to the ongoing relationship between a very strong ongoing relationship with the Al Qaeda and the Taliban, how the Al Qaeda fighters are fighting alongside the Taliban, how they have encouraged the Taliban during these talks with the US, how they have congratulated the Taliban that they have actually won with this kind of an agreement. In addition, Pakistan has pushed in, according to the report, elements of the Lashkar-e-Taiba as well as the Jaish-e-Mohammed in Afghanistan. They are fighting alongside the Taliban against the Afghan security forces as well as against the remnants of the US. Now, given this kind of a situation, the conclusion is that the Taliban do not seek an accommodative process after the US leaves. They seek to establish on the battlefield their victory in Kabul and their ascent into Kabul. And they are fully backed by Pakistan in this regard. So, given this situation, I don't see how peace can be established, because the elected government, the legitimate government, which the world recognizes as Ghani's government, Mr. Ghani's government, is not going to just walk away into the night. And unlike in the 90s, where the bulk of the support from the Taliban came from the Pashtuns today have had about 17, 18 years of peace. Difficult peace, but peace nevertheless. They've had the children go to school, they have hospitals, they've had development. And certainly in the north, the ethnic minorities, the Tajiks, the Hazaras, and the Uzbeks, they don't want to resort back to the Taliban kind of rule of the 1990s. So given this situation and given this scenario, I think peace in Afghanistan is still some ways to go.
Long way to go.
Yeah, US may exit, because that's a promise that campaign promise that
I don't think it's
made.
Well, let's see what happens. But I do not think it's an interest of the United States to exit so quickly. We have so much at stake there, and we need to make sure that the people, the Taliban and the government, the current government, which is the Mr. Ghani, can work together. But I don't see a brighter horizon in terms of the peace process. The fellow who's doing it, Khalil Zad, is a good friend of mine for many, many years. He was ambassador to Afghanistan. He was ambassador to Iraq also. And he is of Afghan origin. So let's see what happens. I want to kind of change the subject. We're talking about you are the member of the India's National Security Advisory Board. Is this board similar to the U.S. National Security in terms of the roles and responsibility? The main function of the NSC in the United States is really to advise the President of the United States in terms of foreign policy on the national security issues. Is the same similar kind of a thing that the India National Security Board has?
No, actually, the comparable body in India is the National Security Council, which is headed by the Prime Minister. Mm-hmm. So we have a similar National Security Council as the US National Security Council. There will be differences, but that is basically the body. The National Security Advisory Board consists of domain specialists who advises the National Security Council through the National Security Advisor. So we are given, for example, subjects to study. We prepare long-term assessments and reports and advise the National Security Council through the NSA. So to that extent, the NSAB is an adjunct to the National Security Council, but the National Security Council would be somewhat similar to the US National Security Council. So I'm not sure whether the National Security Council of the US has an advisory body like what the NSAB in India is. So they probably depend on the agencies to give them studies, whereas here we have a specialized body which studies issues consisting of domain experts, and they are the ones that brief the National Security Advisor on issues of national security.
Do you see what are the security challenges in the South Asia now, and what will be the threat for tomorrow? Do you see the security improving or deteriorating in South Asia in coming years?
You know, the security situation right now is, I would say, not comfortable, especially because of what is happening on the line of control with Pakistan and India, and what is happening on the line of actual control between China and India. So in South Asia,
you're talking about China and India?
Both China and India and Pakistan. So I don't think the security situation is very comfortable at the moment. When you talk in terms of deterioration, I think your indication is whether it will lead to outbreak of hostilities, that will it deteriorate to that extent. I am not sure that that will happen. And I think the main element in that is that China has to accept that they will have to go back to the post-April situation, and that's why negotiations and talks and very prolonged negotiations and talks are going on that. If China sees reason and gets back to the April situation, and then efforts are made to actually define the line of actual control, I think the security situation will improve vastly. But a situation where China does not go back to the situation of April and continues to come into areas which they claim are their own and which we feel are our own, then there is going to be a problem further down the road. So in that case,
it doesn't look very promising, right?
Well, it can. If tomorrow there have always been a disengagement in certain areas. The Galwan Valley, for example, the two countries have disengaged. Now they're talking about disengagement in the lake area and in the Depsang Plains. So if this can also be worked out, there has been some disengagement in the lake area from Finger 4. The Chinese have gone back to Finger 5. But in case this disengagement can take place, then there will be de-escalation and then there will be pullback. So it's a long process. We don't see it as something which is going to happen in a couple of days or a couple of weeks. It's going to be prolonged negotiations, and that's where we are at the moment.
What about the tie between the China and the India? As you probably know, they're growing their footprints in South Asia. And tell us a little bit about the India-China border dispute. And can India defeat China?
So let me break this up into two parts. First, you mentioned about Chinese footprint in South Asia.
Right.
I don't think so. India has a problem with Chinese footprint in South Asia, so long as it is not aggressive and it is not hostile. Where it becomes aggressive and hostile, for example, in the case of Nepal, or it became in the case of Bhutan, where they're pushing for territory, or in the case of Maldives, then it becomes problematic. So otherwise, every country is sovereign enough to decide who it wants to have trade and what is the kind of relationship it wants. I don't think so India can have any problem with that. But when you start pushing a small country like Bhutan and start claiming part of Bhutan territory as your own, then it becomes a problem in South Asia. The other portion that you mentioned of the LAC, see, the problem with India and China border is that the line of the border is not demarcated. So therefore, it's called the line of actual control. We have claims, they have claims. It is not demarcated on a map. Once that demarcation takes place, and India has been pressing a lot, and China deliberately has kept this thing vague so that they can ingress and create problems whenever they can. I think this Galwan Valley incident should be a motivator that we will now have to insist that you have to demarcate the border, whatever your claim line may be. The two of us have to sit down and actually demarcate it on the ground. Without that, there will continue to be hostilities. And I think India is now in a position militarily that we are actually mirroring whatever deployments China has made on the LAC. We have mirrored that deployment. In certain respects, we're even stronger when it comes to air power, for example. So I think the Chinese realized that. And the Chinese realized, in fact, they realized on 15th of June, they thought that it will be a walkover when they went into Galwan Valley. But they suddenly realized that the Indians put up such a strong resistance. And that's the reason why they have not declared their casualties. Because obviously they suffered far more casualties than what India did. And there has been a lot of resentment and talk, even in the Chinese social media, that look at India, they honored the people the bravehearts who died, who became martyrs. Funerals were held all over the country and important leaders visited them. But in China, they just put everything behind a blanket ban and families received just an urn with their ashes. So there's a lot of resentment within China. And the reason for this is that China doesn't want to admit the number of casualties that it suffered. So China has realized that India is not going to be a pushover. This is not 1962. And that's one of the reasons that has made them pause and think.
Is there anything that you want to talk about in terms of the security issue in the South, not South China, but I'm meant to South Asia, that concerns you as we move forward?
Like I said, so long as the Chinese penetration or interaction in South Asia is not hostile, is not aggressive. I think India should have no issues with that. If there is trade issues, but when the suspicion that what is happening in Nepal and how the ambassador has been influencing the Prime Minister of Nepal to take a hostile position vis-a-vis India, but that is something that becomes troublesome as far as India is concerned. I mentioned Bhutan, case of Maldives earlier, or the case of Sri Lanka earlier. When China want to come and base its naval ships or a nuclear submarine or something like that. But those are issues that are going to be problematic in our relationship.
Well, thank you very much, Tilak, for coming to our show. And this is Frank Islam wishing you a great week. And thank you for watching.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me over, and wish your program all success and all the best.